Hello, guys. Happy Thursday. Mark, how's it going?
It's going great. Thank you.
Good.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Anything you're on for today or just sitting in?
Well, I'm eating just like you are. Yeah, I just bought the M2 and I just built the standard frame, and I have some questions on the standard frame.
Okay. Sure. What's up, Casey?
Hey guys,
Well, yeah. So Mark, what's going on with the frame design?
So when I got the canvas up, it says there should be approximately a 4-inch gap in the middle. There's not. There's about a 1 inch on one side and a 2-inch on the other. And turns out that the particle boards that I bought from Lowe's are 2 by 4 by 5/8 inch, are actually 49 inches and not 48. So there's the 1 inch difference on each side. So I wondered if that made a difference, being the canvas, being the part that's going to just really support the board, if that made a difference. From center to the brackets that hold the verticals, it's 51.5 inches, both sides, measured that 15 times just to make sure. So I know my verticals and everything is straight and in line where it's supposed to be. So
Yeah.
that was one question. I emailed technical support 3 or 4 days ago and I hadn't heard nothing. So I figured I'd get online and see if any of you guys had any answers for me on that.
Yeah. So if if the only change that's happening is your length and width, and Casey, I don't know if this is what you've heard about that happening, because that is very common now, is that you'll get a 4x8 sheet and it's got an extra 1/2 inch in both orientations. My understanding is that came about because they were calling a 3/4 inch thickness, and it was closer to 2/3, right? And so to get around the lawsuits they were running into, they just added length and width to make the total volume equivalent, right? Rather than thickening up the material. So all that said, as long as your offsets and everything are accurate, the gaps that exist between that kind of cross gap section, if that's smaller, that doesn't matter at all.
Okay.
As long as your measurements are accurate, it's essentially agnostic to the layout of your frame for the most part. Theoretically, there's definitely better and worse ways to set it up, but having slightly larger boards isn't going to do anything other than give you a slightly more rigid frame.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to start tacking any more wood screws in until I just made sure I didn't have to take everything apart and cut it down. And I didn't think it mattered, but it just, to me, I just wanted to double check before I move forward with it.
Yeah, I would just make sure that in terms of your offsets, in order to keep the math kind of mentally as simple as possible, I would push your excess towards the center of your cross section, right? So if you're supposed to have 4-inch gap horizontal and a 4-inch gap vertical, squeeze them all in so it's more like a 2-inch gap. Don't push your boards out wider, because that can make the mental math of like my actual frame dimensions a little bit more challenging and not fit perfectly within the guide, right? Because honestly, that gap in the middle doesn't really do anything for you. Casey, go for it.
yeah, so remember that at the end of a calibration, you actually do an edge calibration. That is one of the ways that this thing calibrates the top beam and the center of the top beam in relation to the two motors on a triangular axis, right? It measures that to see if it's even on the edges, not in the center necessarily, but the edges of your spoil board. So if boards are kind of different dimensions, just make sure whatever the overhang is on this side, it's the exact same on this side, because your sled is going to go to those edges and it's going to ask you to measure those. And if you have a 2-inch overhang on your right and a 1/2 inch on your left, when you do your calibration, the system's going to come back and it's going to say, wait a minute, it looks like you're not centered on your spoil board, or I think the verbiage is, it looks like you have a clockwise or a counterclockwise skew to your wasteboard. So just remember that, to me, those center marks, the depth, the gap between all four boards, to me is, it doesn't matter what that gap is. What matters is, as long as they're all even on the sides and along the top, and they're perfectly square to that top beam and right in the center, that is what's going to matter to your calibration.
Right. So
Yeah,
that was my next question, because to the left side looking at it is about 1 inch gap, and to the right side looking at it is a 2-inch gap.
Yeah, that's why I said that. I figured when you told me the dimensions of your board, it's like, oh, wait a minute, he's going to have offset gaps. That means the distance from the edge of the, let's say, the center of this motor sprocket over to the edge of the wasteboard might be 49 on this one. If you look at this one over here, the distance from the center of the sprocket to the edge of the wasteboard is going to be 47. Your machine will not like that.
Yeah. So,
but the thing you
so
can
how
do,
do you,
so just real quick, thinking about this as as your frame is square. Let's assume your frame is square. It's true. Everything is aligned the way it needs to be. This type of wasteboard setup essentially requires you to put a 4x8 foot sheet of stock on top of that in order to start calibrating. Otherwise, the sled's going to slide around. It's going to hit those bumps and stuff,
Right.
and it's going to work well. So you should be calibrating with that stock on top. Now, Casey's right. Like if your wasteboards are off and stuff and you're calibrating to your wasteboard, then that's going to be an issue. But if everything is true, then your only goal is to make sure your wasteboard knows exactly where your center point is between those motors, get your stock aligned to that, and then calibrate on your stock. And then when you set up your workspace, make sure you're measuring your 4x8 stock, because it will probably, same issue, have an extra 1/2 inch on there. Add that to your dimensions of your workspace, right? And then measure it against your stock. And as long as your stock is level and centered and your top beam is level and centered, then you're good to go, right? And you don't have to necessarily worry about those canvas pieces being exactly in the right spot, because it's agnostic to where those ultimately are, as long as they're providing support.
right. I get that. And that's what I was going to ask about the calibration. It wouldn't be on the wasteboard, it'd be on the stock board, the one that you're going to cut for.
Right.
Right. So if I wanted to make sure that the wasteboards and the canvas were even on both sides, how does that happen? When the vertical support and the horizontal support are in proper place, and when you attach it down to the bottom horizontal leg. How do you do that? Do you add board to it?
Yeah, so I can answer that. The best way, since you're using the 4-piece method instead of just putting a large 4x8 sheet of MDF on there, what I always advise people to do, if you're using the 4-sheet method, before you put those sheets on, across the bottom of the frame, find your center from your top beam, right? Find the center from your top beam. I would take probably a 1x4x8, something like that. Find the exact center on that and put it on the bottom, right? And measure it and make sure it's on there and screw that down. Then you can start placing your edging, right? You know your edging's perfect because it's the center of the board. Then you can start putting those 4x's anywhere on there, as long as they're even with that board. If you put the two bottom ones on first, whatever that center gap is, but you're even with the edge on the outside, right? Then when you put the next two on top of that, you can take like a 2x4 and lay in there and put them both on there so they have the exact same gap across, and just make sure they're even with the bottom two you just screwed on. So that's how, on a larger 4x8 using 4 pieces instead of the single 4x8 piece, that's how I would put it on and try to ensure that it's all square with that center beam. Start with a bottom piece first, put that bottom piece on, then you're just squaring up a single board with that top beam, right? That's a lot easier to do. Once that's screwed down, well, then the other ones you just put on and make sure they're even to the edges of those. If anything, you might be a millimeter or two off, which when you do an edge calibration, it can make up for that. So yeah, that's the way I would assemble it.
Okay. Yeah, I've got a few more steps. You know, I've got the M2 together, and you know, I still have to put the chain and everything up. I just haven't gotten that far with it yet. And I'm nowhere near calibration at this point, you know, to just trying to get everything going, you know. So, but that was my question. I was just worried about gaps and before I move forward.
So that frame design, I designed it with the purpose in mind of accounting for any variance that could come with material. So you'll find you'll always measure from like the center of a 2x4 rather than the edge, right? Because that accounts for there's going to be variance in thicknesses, whether you're going to Lowe's or Home Depot. You know, I measure from the center of the top beam outward, things like that, because a 12-foot top beam or a 4x8 foot sheet, these all have variance to them. So as long as you follow those really important, you know, measurements, it should accommodate any of that variance you're going to find. And again, you will have a smaller or larger plus, or, you know, plus in the middle, but yeah, you're right. You get it measured on the stock and you'll be fine too. And Casey's got a great method there as well. There's lots of ways to get this done. And once you really wrap your head around like what is truly important to this process, and you've really got an intuitive understanding of that, it's a lot faster. But you're on the right path. You're doing great.
Great. I'm looking forward to it. You know, I've been looking at it for a long time, and I finally went, I'm going to do it. So.
Right on. Well, we're glad to have you join.
Yeah, that's the only questions I really had at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, as someone who's just probably a couple of months ahead of you, we can relate to where you've been, and you will. We've learned a lot since the first assembly. We're getting really good at calibration, but yeah, there's, you know, once you get into it, you do it a few times, like, okay, that's why that, you know, that's why that's done. But yeah, good luck with it.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
So
Matt, what have you been making? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Casey.
Oh, so here's just food for thought, right? Me personally, whenever I run my machine, I don't do edge calibration, and I don't do the accuracy calibration, because I put a board on there and I can move that board anywhere on there. I don't care where the edge of my spoil board is. I could cut anywhere, top, bottom, middle, sides, right? My workspace is what my workspace is. I will calibrate all the way down to the last step. And if you think about the math, what that is doing is it's finding the center. It's validating from the center of where your work surface is with just a calculated number. It's finding the center of that work surface to the center of your top beam versus the center of your motors. To me, that's good enough. I get within 1 mil and mine cuts just fine. You can go through and you can do all the edge calibrations. You can do all that if you want. But every time you do that, because of the variation in the board, you end up with something like 2.3 millimeters accuracy. So I know it, people hear me say that and they're just like, oh, what? Oh, no, you have to. You don't have to. I never do. I never have. In 2 years, I don't use the edge calibration or any of the others. I just do up to that calibration, because the center of my workspace compared to the center of my top beam and the motors, that's what matters. That's where you're telling the system that's where my center point is. But because MakerMade has a feature called Set Work Home, the edge calibration is no longer valid. It doesn't matter. I can set my work home anywhere I want, but Makerverse knows where the center of my workspace is. That's what matters.
So
kind of a 2 cents.
How about the Z-Axis calibration? Because that's something that we found we want to do before we run every single piece. Okay.
Yep. So your Z-Axis calibration, I don't know if you've watched my YouTube channel. I have a very in-depth video on how I calibrate my Z-axis.
Oh,
It shows you how to go in, run the Z-axis, how to measure, what to measure, and then how to hit the offset distance and then recalculate.
So
And
what's your channel?
again, I can't post it on here. Patrick, can you? When I try to copy that and post it in the chat for some reason on my side, it won't paste.
Oh, that's weird. I'm gonna pull it up for him right now.
But there's a bunch of videos on the M2 on there, and I'm working on a series now. I just ordered a new Mac. I'm going back to a Mac. Windows. I ordered a new Mac. It'll be here on Tuesday. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to redo those videos with the Mac. And you guys will see, actually, it's a series video that shows every tab. There's a video dedicated to every tab in the calibration system. So you can go in there. I explain what the data points are, which ones you want to change, which ones you don't. It's just a set number. Just leave it alone. Don't touch it. Right. And then I show you how, I think Mark, you was talking about which measurements, or maybe it was Patrick that said, hey, which measurements really matter, right? There's actually 5 pieces of data that I measure, and I ensure I'm as accurate as possible within within a millimeter. I get it that close. Then I write them down. And once you have that data and it's recorded and you don't change your frame, I can blow through a calibration in less than 3 minutes. I can recalibrate my whole machine. So it's a point to where if I go to start a cut during the day, I'll go in and I'll pull up that data and I'll go through and I'll do a quick calibration on it. I don't do the chain reset. I just do a quick calibration on it, throw the material on there, and I start cutting. And I rarely have any wasted bad cuts and bad wood, because I do that before every day before I start doing a bunch of cuts.
Great, thanks.
Matt, what have you been making?
A variety of things. Made a few signs. We're making pieces for a bit of music-related furniture that has multiple parts. So yeah, we're I guess dozens of pieces in. Maybe we're up to 100 total cuts that we've done. One of the things we ran into recently is that when we set up a piece to cut, we'll pull in the code, load it up, and it'll run the piece. We had a couple of things happen. One is that it thinks the depth of the piece is much deeper than the actual piece, even though when we go back to the source, and we've been using easel to generate the code. And if anybody has a recommendation for a free or inexpensive tool, it's better than easel. And the other thing is, it will, because I just ran a piece about an hour ago. It had the depth right, but it had a lot of extra tool movement after it was finished. So it said it was going to take 45 minutes to cut the piece. And I've been watching it, and I watched it, and I could tell that it was done the piece. And then the Z retracted to negative 0.5, and it was just retracing in empty space that it had already created. And I stopped the machine at that point, but it thought it had another, half hour to go, but it was clearly already done. So we're not confident in the code that we're producing. It's, like I said, it seems to have a lot of extra stuff in it.
So it's not the code, it's the design.
Okay.
Yeah. So whatever you've designed, are these things that you physically design yourself in, I don't know, in a design software somewhere else, and you pulled an STL file in and you're trying to cut it? Was it something you downloaded from the internet?
Yeah, you know what? I'll let my brother, who's the dark square, John.
That's wondering who was hanging out over there.
Yeah. So what happens is, when you export, especially something from Etsy, I think it is, I hear so many problems with that, because people out there in Etsy land, right? They do all these fancy designs and they want to sell you an STL. The funny thing is they've never cut that. They don't know if it works or not.
Right.
They just have a fancy design and they're trying to make some coin, especially the cutting boards one. Oh man, you can buy 60 cutting board designs for $4.50. They've never put those on a CNC and they have no idea whether they work. And when you load them up, I did this a year and a half ago. I loaded one up. The STL has lines and then a line outside the line. It was the way they designed it. So when you generate that G code, you bet that line outside of a line gets a cut. Now you don't see it unless you super zoom in on that line. But yeah, when your system, easel will have wasted movement, especially the free version. So just that you have to deal with it. But what you're talking about, the wasted movement, isn't wasted movement. That's actual G code because the system sees something that needs to be cut.
Got it.
So it's your design. You got to either redesign it, find it from a different source, design it from scratch up, right? And
Well, these are definitely from scratch. I'll let John speak more of that.
Yeah. So one of the things is that I didn't think we could get STLs into easel. We're taking, I'm sorry, not an STL. Let me back up. So one of the things we've been doing recently is taking a JPEG that we create, all right, create an image in whatever software. Then we just take a JPEG snapshot of it. We have to go out to Convertio to convert it into an SVG. Then we bring that SVG into easel. And when we do that, I'll tell you, something else that has really been goofy is that it will only, when we pull it into easel, the only shape we can cut is on the path. When we go to cut it outside of the path, it puts this little sliver of extra, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So
yeah,
like,
exactly.
So I'm not sure exactly the process to get it from paper to easel. That might be a good place to start.
Oh boy.
So let me ask you this real quick. Are you folks using the laser? Do you have the laser?
No.
Okay, so there is specific software out there, and some of them, like if you had the laser, my thought was heck, you have it for free. In like Lightburn, you can put in a JPEG in Lightburn, and you can tell it to trace the image. And it will take that image and then it'll copy an image on top of it. You grab it and you drag it off to the side, and you can delete the JPEG, and it creates the file to burn. That file to burn could then be transferred to whatever to cut. And it's always right. It's just, I don't know how the heck Lightburn does that, but any other software conversion I've tried always has its little quirks. The Lightburn software never has that problem. It's perfect every time. I don't know how it does it. So to your point, anytime I want to do a JPEG, I did a whole bunch of cutting boards for Christmas, big barbecue Texas size cutting boards. It was like, I don't know, 2 foot by 3 foot, big ones where you can do like 60-pound briskets at once. And I burned etchings on the back of those, and I imported a JPEG and I just told it to trace it, and it came out perfect every time. And then you can export that as whatever drawing you want.
So I'd be curious on those, Casey, too, though, how well those would work for milling purposes.
That's what I'm saying. You can export, once you do the trace, you can save that as multiple file types and just save it to your desktop. Then open up easel and import that.
Yeah. So what you're doing is there, guys, is it's a raster to vector conversion, right? And most of your standards, most of your like high-end Glowforges, Crickets of the world have a version of that. And typically they prefer to start, even if you import an SVG, they'll revert it back to a raster image and reconvert it themselves, because they just want to have ownership of that process, because they know better what you're trying to get to than the designer who created the original file typically does, because most people are like importing from somewhere else. But what it comes down to is like So like, look at my logo here. So you could see this like as somebody who's milling this out, I could just want to do the outline of this. But the file, if it's going to read this and convert it to a vector, is going to read anything that transfers from light to dark as like inside a line and outside. It's an edge. It looks at edges and then tries to convert an edge between colors into a new line. But the problem is then when you end up with like, text like my name here, right? From a milling standpoint, I might just want that K to be one line, but it's going to interpret that as an outline potentially in a big block, or depending on the style, it might interpret it as like 3 separate lines, right? So it doesn't understand what type of cutting you're wanting to accomplish. So this is a huge challenge. And Casey's totally right. When you go and buy these files online, these are graphic designers who are understanding a file in terms of what is easy to manipulate in Illustrator, not what is easy to manufacture on a CNC, right? It's a completely different path structure. That's where the challenge really comes into play. And he's right, the Lightburn's conversion tool is the best I've seen. Illustrator's is trash. Lightburn's is great. Easels is okay. Glowforge has an amazing one, but theirs is primarily just for lasering, so it's not as helpful. It's for lasering. It's not as helpful here. But yes, that's a challenge y'all are running into. And I would totally agree that if you're able to click that file, you may find multiple paths stacked on top of each other. See if you can strip those out as well. But yeah, there's going to be
because the design will actually have a black line on top of a black line. And whenever you click on it, it shows the little blue box, the dotted line. It shows a bundle or a line set that you've clicked on, but you can't tell visually that there's black lines under black lines underneath of it. So
we've been playing with ways to better convert this specifically for the use of CNC. It is a huge challenge. It really, really is, to convert what is an edge in a block into a singular line inside of that. The computer's just like, they don't understand. It's one of those like, are you a robot test essentially?
Yeah. So if I can just go back to what you're saying, get the laser. You mean a physical laser attachment for the M2?
Yeah.
So the M2 has a laser. It's a 2.8 watt laser, but it uses a software to run called not a software to run. It uses a design software called Lightburn.
Got it.
And that Lightburn software, you set up the parameters for the M2, but then you can drag and drop any JPEG. Heck, I go on like Google and I'll right click on an image and copy it and I'll paste it directly in there. And then I'll click on it and say trace outline, and it'll strip all that junk out of it. And I can move it to the side and just delete the JPEG or the image that I got from Google. And it leaves me with a solid, crisp design that I can then use on the M2 with a laser. But you can actually save that as different file types. So I think, if I remember right, you can save it as a file for cutting, right? So then you can take that and just save it to your desktop, and then go into easel, upload it into easel, and set all your parameters, and that file is correct. It's only, you got a single line. You can cut inside, outside the line, on the line. It gives you all those options back.
Right. So, gosh, my question was, in easel, do you know if you can import STLs? I thought it only allowed you to do SVGs.
Well, you can do, I'd have to look again for STLs. It's been a little bit for me, but
Pretty sure you can.
You can do, I think it's SVGs, STLs. You can do .dwg files. You can do AutoCAD files. The trick is if you have easel open, look on the right-hand side. There's a little Lego block, looks like a Lego block. Click on that, and that's an app. That's all the apps for easel. And in there, you open that up, and you can scroll all the way down. There's one that's called a DXG, a DX converter for like AutoCAD files, or other files for design. Yeah, DX files. You can convert those, and they convert really well, because I make a lot of furniture, And I upload 2D flat files from Google SketchUp all the time and it converts it perfectly.
Interesting. Thank you.
I'm gonna beat this dead horse one more time here and just pull up a project on my easel for y'all to see. Share screen.
And you're talking to somebody here, just from my experience, I don't use Easel Pro, folks, over 2 years. I've been using the free software forever. It works just fine for me. I don't need the pro version. The pro version of Easel, all that does is really, it says that it's supposed to make your machine movements less wasteful, but I don't think it does. I think it just gives you the ability to do a different type of like a raster routing, which is, to me, is no big deal. But the big benefit of Easel Pro is you're supposed to be able to save different sizes and dimensions of bits, and then save the profile of that to the speed, etc. And you're able to use V-bits. So those are the two, to me, those are the only things you get for that $20 a month from Easel Pro.
Yeah, and Carbide Create offers the V-bit for free. So, yeah, just real quick. I know, again, we've talked about this, but like this in Easel right now is a single line file. It is a on the line, right? Cut is on the shape path in the middle, and it understands, because it's got a thickness of the bit, that there's going to be a thickness to the path, right? But if I were to snapshot this with my computer and then import it, a conversion file, a raster to vector, is going to see this outside line as a line and this inside line as a line. It's not going to see that as a single line. In the same way that on like, what's up? There we go. Like these are ones I cut out not long ago. I had to convert this, but I thought I could just import the JPEG and we all see this as a line drawing, but the conversion file sees it as 2 lines running parallel all the way around, right? So that's just part of the problem. But
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna stop presenting. Who else we got on here? Or did that answer y'all's questions? I think it did. I think we answered a lot of it extensively.
Yeah, it certainly helps.
Good. Lauren, how's it going, man?
The only other thing I noticed,
Oh,
the only other thing I noticed that we were doing the other day was when you pull up Easel, the workspace that it's showing you is zeroed out at 0, 0, which is the middle of our work. So if we want to go left or right or down, we have to go negative in Easel. Is that right?
No, so hold on. What I would do is in Easel, always set 0, 0 as your bottom left-hand corner. So you see how Patrick's right now is 0, 0.
Yeah.
I would set this to where whatever you want to cut, it's as close to 0, 0. See how you see the little dice up there? It has bottom, left, center, etc. Yeah, right there. So I always choose mine bottom left, just like he has highlighted there. And I move that design clear over there to the bottom left-hand side as far as I can go while keeping it on the board. Then I go ahead and I upload that into Makerverse. In Makerverse, this is what we was talking about earlier. Once you put your board, your cut board or whatever in Makerverse, physically move your sled, in Makerverse using the arrows, move it down to where you think the bottom left-hand corner is going to be for this. And you click set work home for X and Y. And you'll see that 0, 0 in Makerverse. It goes from the very center. It'll jump right down there to where your bit currently is. And it'll say, okay, you want work home to be down here.
Got it.
And that's where it'll start. That's where it'll start its cut.
So all I do on mine, guys, is, and everybody's got, a lot of people have different ways to do this. Everybody has a way that works well for them. So it'll import right here in the middle, whatever you're dropping in, you work on it, you finish it up. Last step I do is I click the center of the dice and then I just go 0, 0, and that's it, right? And then I export it from there. And now you can now it's going to import smack dab in the center of your workspace. And then you can still set your work home anywhere you want, and it'll understand, oh yeah, I need to start here for that. It'll move it right where you want it to go. But I just set my dice at square in the middle and then click XY00, done.
Yep.
So,
The
so where is the set work home setting? Is that the X and Y? Can you show that in Makerverse?
I'm not connected to a board right now.
Okay.
So, yeah, but it's right under your jog commands, right?
Right.
It's right under your jog commands, and it'll say set work home. Depending on which version you've got, it's going to look slightly different, but
Okay.
it's right there. It's a big button.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey, Pat.
Yeah. What's up?
So you brought up something earlier. You showed that design, looked like a ballerina or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And you were like, hey, when you load this up, it recognizes that it's not just a line, but a thickness of a line. So it sees the outside and the inside of the line, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I actually do is Inkscape, and you can change it from a stroke to a path, right? And you can actually recognize it as a single line. And then when you do it in Makerverse or you do it in Easel, you actually tell it to cut in the center of that path, and it will recognize it as a line.
Excellent.
So
Lauren
you
has
can
so
actually-
many good tricks like this.
So like, depending on what I'm doing, so I've done different designs, play with whether you want it to mill on the line, outside the line, or inside, and it'll directly affect how it cuts that path.
So,
so-
Lauren, are you saying that you can take a JPEG of like that line drawing of that ballerina? You can drop it into Inkscape and do a raster to vector conversion with this stroke to path understanding,
so you
and it will
can
create
choose
one
two
line.
things. You can convert to a path, or you can convert to a stroke. And I'm getting them mixed up every time. I have to literally every time I do it and I undo it and I do the other one, depending on what I'm trying to do. But one is like essentially, so you've ever seen, like I did one the other day and I was frustrated because it wasn't what I wanted to do and the software was having issues with it. Because it doesn't sound like it's as good as Lightburn, but Easel doesn't recognize. So when you're drawing, for example, a circle, right? A simple circle, Easel doesn't recognize a circle from Inkscape or a file from Inkscape, an SVG, as any of the stroke. So like if you're drawing that outside path, you know how like you can thicken the stroke or shrink the stroke, it only recognizes the original shape, right? But you can change that and it'll recognize that as a stroke. So it'll recognize that piece as one line.
I just
If
don't.
I had it, I could show you how it works.
That's
But yeah.
amazing, because I don't understand how it would be capable of doing that on something like that ballerina drawing. Like, because to me, especially on that one, because like, okay, I can understand if I'm going to hold this up real quick. So I've got, let's say 2 lines next to each other like that. Oop, there we go.
Oh, I can't see it.
Right, you can see there, those 2 lines, and I could see like, oh, okay, like you can understand like the middle is the path, right? And then this is the width is the stroke, right? I understand that, but the problem with something like the ballerina file is the line is curling around on itself. So how does it understand the continuation of a line to say, there's the path that's continued all the way through? I don't understand how it wouldn't see that. That would be fascinating if Inkscape really can do that, though.
So can I show you something? I can show you that because PowerPoint has this very similar function. I'm just at work right now. I don't know if I can share it. I can show you.
Everybody can share now. Yep, perfect.
Let's see if I can share.
I'd love to see this.
Maybe not. Here we go.
I like the Thursday meetings where I learn something too, which is most of them.
Can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
So PowerPoint is a similar function, and I'll try to show you what I mean. So normally, like, you have a shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, a shape has 2 different functions in it. You have the fill,
Yep.
which has a color, right? But then you also have a line,
Yep.
which you can thicken, and that's your stroke.
Yeah.
Right? But you can also, and I'm just showing you PowerPoint's version. You can draw stroke paths.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But there's 2 different types there, right? Because I can do that same type of shape. Well, wrong shape. Where I connect them, those dots, and it becomes one, and you still have that stroke.
Yep.
Watch what happens when I take this shape. There's no feel, but I can also still do the stroke itself. The difference is
sure.
when you put it into easel, it doesn't recognize this. It just sees it as a path to cut. So when you tell it to cut on the line, it's going to start and cut all the way around that line, directly on that path.
But there's nothing to tell it, again, because in this instance, you've created your anchor points, right? So you created your first, second, third, fourth, and fifth anchor points. And your first and second are the straight line from upper left to bottom right there. And that makes sense to us because we saw you draw it. But if you're importing that as a raster, there's nothing to tell the program that anchor point 1 to anchor point 2 is the straight line that you want to make. It may go from anchor point 1 to that cross section, stop there, and then make a hard left downward turn and go that way instead, right?
It may or it may not. So sometimes what you can do in Inkscape is you can break them apart.
Okay.
So even on certain ones, so if I had that design in Inkscape, I've also taken and quickly just clicked along the points and then bent the line and then created my own vector quickly.
Yeah.
That way.
Got it.
Because at the end of the day, what determines the thickness of this line when it mills it is simply the thickness of the bit.
But here's the other side. If it does go down and it gets to where it crosses and it goes left instead of going straight down, does it matter? As long as that still look.
No, it definitely doesn't. For sure.
It might seem like it might take a little longer to mill, but your end result is exactly what you want. So who gives a crap, right?
Yeah, no, 100 in that instance, 100%. I guess what I'm saying is I would be impressed if, given that fact that because it doesn't know what the lines are, right? That's what we're essentially asserting is it goes, well, I see where paths are, I guess, but I don't see what the line really, the continuation of a line is here. How does it recognize the actual line? Because it has to essentially go, here's an edge and here's an edge, and these two edges are opposite sides of the same line, split the difference and meet in the middle. But when you've got loopy loops all over the place, that's the part where that's impressive to me, if it can still understand.
Here's how you'll know, right? So when you go in and it's the same kind of function, is right. I can click a node and I can bend that node however I want to bend that node, right?
Yeah, in Illustrator we call them anchors.
And I click to see it, it'll recognize it, and you'll tell if it recognizes it, and you can actually separate them out. Is when you go to edit those nodes, you go, oh, wow, too slow with the mouse. You'll be able to flex those, and you can tell it to break those nodes apart, and it'll create an individual path.
Got it. Okay, I'm gonna have to get into Inkscape and play with this. This is fascinating. Super cool.
I believe Illustrator has the same function. I just can't remember what it's called. It's one of those things like
line trace.
It is
image trace. Image trace, I think, is what it's called.
And it'll create that single path. You can transfer it to a path.
But it's more for graphic designers.
Oh, yeah. So Patrick, I think the lesson learned here in the action is that if you want this functionality, you need to call up Bill Gates and see if you can just buy PowerPoint from him.
Yeah. How much you want for it, Bill? That's great. Lauren, thanks for the run through there. That's really, really interesting. Guys, this is such a fascinating topic because it's really like it's machine learning, right? Is what it really comes down to. It's teaching a machine how to recognize these things. Is fascinating.
Well, in these discussions, we usually talk about the machine, right? It's always the technical component of the machine. But even in our forums that you look online at the forums, very rarely does anybody talk about design skills. It's always machine skills, right? Makerverse, how to get the machine to do this. Very rarely does anybody talk about, hey, how do I do this in Lightburn or something like that? So that information is scarce, the design side of the whole thing, I guess.
Yeah. Well, see, I think that's a piece that's one of the few pieces I think that the marketplace is missing is the ability to, there's some of us out here that have done it a lot. And some of them that I'm surprised by how many people still buy all their SVGs. Like they don't create a single one. I think it'd be a great idea to add it to the marketplace of, look, if you're not into the technical side, you know how to turn the machine on and make it run, but here's some contacts in that marketplace, reach out and for a pretty standard fee per hour, just to kind of standardize it if you're willing to be a part of that list of, hey, we'll build you a design and turn it around.
100% more of a turnkey, bespoke but turnkey process where you just say, hey, designer so and so, like, this is what I'm looking for, and they give you, and you say, I'm looking to put it on this surface, and they create the, like, all the way down through the G code for you.
Right. Because
Yeah,
I'm weirdly enough recently, like, doing shows. We did a show last weekend, and I mean, we did pretty decent, but I got quite a bit of people coming to me being like, hey, I need you to make something for me, like a design. Like, they wanted to, they didn't necessarily want me to cut it out, but they needed help with the design piece. And yeah, so I just kind of a twist of like original plans for a show, but yeah.
But I mean, like, these are such disparate skill sets, right? You've got like the ultra creative, like, graphic designer side, and then you've got like the woodworking side, and then you've got, again, like the machinist side that you've got. I mean, this is a really, I mean, again, I said it last week, anybody who can do this has been able to pull together multiple skills in both hemispheres of their brain, right? You can't do this without being able to access left, right, and then all kinds of technical and creative skill sets if you're really going to use this thing to its full potential. And giving folks more opportunity to reach that potential without having to call on all of those skill sets themselves, but rely on others in the community who have better skill sets in one facet of that, is absolutely right, Lauren. Like, I think 100% that's the way we got to keep going. Great idea.
Well, I know, like,
Details.
a while back when Drew was on, I did a quick like tutorial for Inkscape on how to build your own SVG. I don't know if that ever made it to the YouTube, but I think it took me like 10, 15 minutes. As a quick rundown. I think there's not just for the shows, you know, we're talking about like doing a show for how to do your own shows, how to sell your market. I think it's worth doing one for the makers out there saying, hey, this is how I design. This is, you know, grab 4 or 5 of us, and this is my methodology to create a design.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. No, I totally agree. Again, I think eventually we should get to a place where the marketplace looks more like, you know, like Food Network recipes section, where it's like, we're going to make tortellini and you're going to need this type of pasta and this kind of sauce. And for us, it's, we're going to make this coffee table and you're going to need this type of wood and you're going to need this kind of type of stain and these chair legs or table legs off of Amazon, right? And it's just, it is the complete recipe book. And then here's the G code to get the job done, right? That's what a lot of people are looking for, I think, at least from an entry standpoint. Like, hey, let me get my feet wet first before you go make me create everything on my own in Inkscape and easel and the like, right? Get some confidence. Cool. That was a great conversation. What else we got, guys? Anything else going on?
I've got to make like 30 circles tomorrow, so that'll be fun.
Oh yeah, coasters?
No, giant 18-inch circles. It'll be good times.
Big coasters.
We one of the fun things that you deal with. So I was, you know, I told y'all I got to move soon, and so we're going through our crafting space, building areas, and trying to make sure we have everything get ready to pack away. Just kind of getting a mental plan, you know. I was surprised. We have several items that were paid for and never picked up. Yeah, and then we really got into a business. You'd be surprised. I encourage people out there to, like, one of the things that's really, it took off for a minute, it'll go in spurts, is you have all the stuff at your disposal to do versions of painting with a twist. And it takes a little bit of prep, but like one of them we did was just the circles. Another one we did, everybody sent in a month prior their name, and then we supplied them with the training on how to paint their name and hang it on their front door. Those kind of things. There's a lot of like different options out there, and it's too easy with a machine like this to create a business like that, and people loved it.
Oh, that's cool. I'm guessing that milling with a twist wouldn't really work out too well, getting a bunch of red wine. Someone's getting a finger in a router.
Yeah, but I mean, it's been a lot of fun to try to, you know, because painting with a twist, you think about it, like they showing up and everybody's doing the same exact thing.
Yeah.
We did one with I think I showed pictures of the ornaments at one point. We did one. We had like 15 people show up. Each one of them got 3 ornaments. And it took my wife, I think she did over 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours. Everybody was having glasses of wine, and they made like 40 or 50 ornaments across the group.
Yeah.
And she made $500 something off the deal. You know, it was just a good time. And if they wanted extra, she even took her Cricut and let them purchase extra items. Like, hey, I want to add this to my ornament. And she would design it up real quick and cut it out, and they'd add it to their ornament. So it's pretty cool. This business, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of options here to do small business, extra little side hustles with the machine.
Yep. 100% there are a ton of them.
So you want to
Excellent.
see an update on the new frame, Patrick? Lauren, I know you were interested. You want to see it?
Mm-hmm.
I definitely do, because I'm going to need to put it up in my new garage.
Okay, so I'm working on basically the last piece. Let's see if you guys can see this here. Can you guys see that?
Hey, Casey, go ahead, but I'm going to have to come. For some reason, I'm not seeing your video feed. I'll drop off, come right back in.
All right.
Oh, I'm going to spotlight them. Let's see. Okay. Should be held up now.
There you go. So the last piece that I did here, let me get it over here. A little bit better for you guys. So the last piece here, before we start on our videos, I wanted to have a complete frame done. But you can see what I've done here was I redesigned the basically your weight system. It gets rid of the spring up here. I designed a pulley system here. It has these bearing driven pulleys in it. And it just bolts up there. Now I've changed the design just a little bit. These two here will sit on top of each other. So both of these will go over and wrap up, want to come back the other way. But what I did was in that centerpiece, I added a line and it says center line. So whenever you're doing your calibration, you know exactly where to move that pin to. So the center line of your pulley system should be the center line of the top beam, which should be the center line of your pin anytime you do a calibration. Very quick, very easy. And then these right here, I modified these to where they hinge, because this whole thing right here, when you pull the cable, as everybody's seen before, you pull the cable, the whole thing lifts and slides back, sets up flush against the wall. So to prevent these things from binding up, these right here are just hinged with the same thing in the middle. Once that's done, that's it. I'm printing up the last one over here now on the printer, getting it going. So hopefully it'll be done here in about 2 more hours and we'll be doing a full assembly.
So Casey, how do you feel about what is holding the weight in, or what is in the weight?
In the green box, you're talking about the green box dangling there on the side, right?
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah.
It's actually just a box and I put a brick in it and put a top on it. But it's an enclosed box because I have 2 designs. So I have the enclosed box that you see over there, or there's this one, right? Same thing, kind of the same design, only less material to print, takes less time to print. But I kind of like that one simply because I can put water in it. I can put sand in it. It'll fit a brick. It'll fit anything that you want in there. And then you just put the top on, screw the top on, done. So if you don't want to use a brick, some people want to use sand or whatever, they can just go ahead and put whatever in it and you're done.
So
I was just gonna put a little plate on the end. I just gotta put a little 5-pound plate on each one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we could
Yeah,
also
you don't
use
have to use those. You can just hook anything on there actually, because the cable will have an eyelet in it. You can hang or dangle anything you want off of it, just as long as it's enough.
Is there any way that the weights could hang behind the frame rather than to the side?
No, remember the frame folds up against the wall.
Right.
So it folds up and hits it. They originally were, I had a whole different setup where they went up and over and around the beam and went down. But depending on where I had the the M2 at any given time and I folded the frame up flat, sometimes the frame would fold flat and it would hit the brick and it would stick out from the wall. So that would require the user to always move the frame to a specific point before they shut everything down. And if they do that enough times, especially with a larger frame, that's a lot of weight slamming against those cases that are holding those bricks. So
All right.
I just pivoted them to the outside, and you can
I got a
move them
question.
farther out. You can see it. There's 2 bolts that hold that in. So that pulley, you can actually move it closer to the frame right here. There you have actually right here. You see this pulley? You can loosen the bolts and move it closer to the frame this way, or farther out if you want to move it clear out here. Just depends on where you want the brick to dangle. So it's
All right, so I got a question for that,
movable.
because I like the idea, but I also understand the problem with the weight. And I'm thinking, hey, when I fold it up, I don't want the weights hanging, right? Because I'm going to be folding it up under, I'm planning on doing it on a garage door, right? What if I went ahead and purchased 2 of the springs and tied it from the pulley down to the side of the frame? So when the frame folded up, it just folded with it, and it's just a spring keeping that tension.
I thought about that. I thought about hooking the normal spring down here on the bottom corner and then coming up to the eyelet on there. I think I'm gonna, let's be honest, there's 1,000 ways to do that, whether you're using brick, your water jugs, whatever anybody wants to use, or in your case, you want to tie a spring to it so it's got constant tension. That's completely up to you. I think another way, I had another gentleman that asked me about it the other day. They said, hey, if I don't want the bricks to sit there and stretch the chain and everything out while it's just leaning up against the wall, can I take that off? Well, if you do, then everything's going to sag. So what I would do is you could go ahead and take the bricks off, set them on the floor, and just take a little piece of rope and tie it down to something so it just keeps the cable tight.
Yeah. Did you tell them that chain's a little stronger than 5-pound brick?
Yeah. Well,
No, the only reason I like the weight idea, I think it's simplistic. It's cheaper.
The thing is
I'm just only concerned about pulling it up.
Yeah, the thing is, everybody talks about chain stretch, but I'm telling you from an engineering standpoint, 5 pounds on that chain over a 6-month time period is not gonna really.
No, I mean, I'm already looking at
but it's in people's minds. So what about chain stretch? So that's
no, because one of the things I'll be purchasing, like people don't realize either, is what I didn't realize is that, like, just, I keep saying this, the nature of the beast. I'm probably going to have to replace my chains anyway, just living in Georgia and the humidity swings. I've oiled that dang chain down and still rust is just building up over time. It's just the nature of it. And with anything, people think, oh, I'm buying it once and I'm never spending another dollar on this machine. Okay, good luck. But no, it's the nature of it. Every few years, you're gonna have to do maintenance, especially if you use it enough. The only reason why I saw an issue with the weights is I'm planning on hanging it. And obviously, I'll put it this way. I've removed all chandeliers from my house because I banged my head on them and I was like, never again. So I don't have chandeliers in my house. I'll never have chandeliers. And the last thing I need is weights hanging in my garage as I walk underneath them and bop my head on them. Yeah. From a wall standpoint, I can buy into that. I think it's smart and it's cheaper. But if I'm going up with the frame versus against the wall, I got to come up with a different solution. But I think the way you have that design is stupid easy to, especially because extruded aluminum, you can put a tie point that can go up and down the frame depending on the length of your spring too. So you can tie anywhere along the backside of that frame.
So what I would do when you fold the back frame up, I'm just sitting thinking about it. Then you have another frame behind a frame, right? It's a square.
Right.
What I would do is I would go ahead and fold the leg out or whatever, however you're going to have that, especially if you're hanging it up, fold that leg up and clip it, because I have a little clip that holds the legs together in the folded mode. So whenever you fold that up, then just take a bungee, wrap it through the eyelet and the cable and down around the leg frame. And that bungee will just hold that thing until you're ready to use it and set the bricks off to the side someplace.
Yeah, because I was even thinking, because that folding leg is, I have a bunch of old little magnets from Harbor Freight. And I was just going to basically tie a little piece of steel to that leg and basically when I fold up, it just clip to the magnet and keep it attached to the frame until I'm ready to pop it down.
Yeah.
Because I think the design is absolutely perfect for what I need. I just, the little pieces when it comes to changing it from a wall mount to a ceiling mount, I got to kind of think that through. But the biggest piece that I look for right now is having 2 CNC machines side by side. The one, man, I think I got some lessons learned for you later. I need to call you this weekend if you got time, just to talk through some things. But the challenge is this one cuts very fast, too fast for my bits. So learning through that. And then one cuts much bigger. And what I am finding for some reason, I don't know what it is. New year, new problems. People want larger things. So I see myself needing to keep a larger footprint. The biggest challenge that I face right now is I've got the normal chains and a normal size frame. So, like that. I know I don't need it. You ain't got to tell me that I don't need that level of accuracy. I understand that. But in my head, I need that level of accuracy. It drives me nuts otherwise. So I'm going to build it double probably, or close to double what you have, so that I can put that one sheet on there, charge somebody $100 just for the materials, and then build them whatever size they want. Because we're already getting into this, I can see the sign business happening. And speaking of like that stroke versus path, when you're doing your design, all you got to do is draw that stroke through the middle of your word, and it'll mill it out perfectly for that, the lights to go, like those little things. And yes, I'm going to Florida where money, I mean, it's a little bit more free down there. Like people spend a lot of money in Florida. So yeah, we're looking at a potential, like we're having kind of dead months now as we transition, but I'm seeing a pretty big upswing and being able to charge a little bit more. And I've got to, if I want to really make some money, I got to be able to transition to those larger items, signs, those kind of things. I had a business approach me at the show last weekend, wanted me to make a sign for their business. Yeah, so I just realized I was hoping to cut it down, like you said, cut it down to like 2 machines, one doing the broad-based 4x4 with one cutting smaller, but I'm probably going to need to keep it closer to 4x8. It's just how it's going to be. But
yeah, cool.
Well, whatever you need. I mean, your business is going to define what your need is, right?
Right. I thought I was going to take off. I thought other things was going to be the priority. Yeah. I don't know. Weird things in life.
So who is a dead man?
Yeah,
On
I
here?
was wondering too.
Dead man, are you on? Got some questions, thoughts?
I was just listening in. Sorry. I just saw it on your website about listening in on your meeting. And,
yeah.
I recently purchased a new M2. So just going through the motions and learning curves and things like that. That's all.
How's it going for you?
Well, I was made my first cut on using the easel. Of course, don't like their free version, so I switched over to what is it, Carveco. A little more, I don't know, I won't say user friendly, but a little less expensive. Dealing with some soft codes as far as when I uploaded a file that I made, the G codes are loaded and everything, and the biggest problem I have is it's saying it's within this, what is it, the soft range, it won't cut, but I can cut the easel fine. I'm not sure if it's because it's the difference between the G code file and the NC file, or if it's actually out of range. Like it's saying a little 12 by 14 piece of wood, and it's saying it's out of range. And I play with the numbers on the XY and get it centered up, and it looks great on where it's going to cut, but it just says it will not cut because of the soft. It's out of range. But something said to look on the numbers on the left hand side of Makerverse, which I didn't do. I guess the only other, so I'm dealing with that, and I don't know what's the difference between one's a G code file versus the NC file. I'm not too sure. So this, just sharing and not really looking for answers, but yet sort of just kind of bouncing it out there, still researching, still looking. Been out of the CNC business for about 10 years, so
Okay.
been away from it. I've I was machinist for Vistacon doing contact lens dies way back when, and well, I haven't touched it in a very long time, and so just get my feet wet again. I think that's there. There you go. See a picture of who I am. Yeah. So my first run of it went great. And using the easel program, and it just seemed really too simplistic, and it seemed cost effective to switch over to Carveco, and that's where I start running into problems. So that may be just me.
I've never heard of Carveco before. I'm looking at their website right now. Which version are you using? The entry level, or are you using like Plus?
Maker, Carveco Maker?
Yeah, the entry. Okay, cool. How much did that cost you, by the way? Just don't mind me asking.
$15 a month.
Okay.
Which the easel was $24 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know. I was in debate about either one, really.
Yeah.
But I don't know if one file, the easel was broke down into an NC file, and Carveco, I played around. Some guy talking about the G code controls, that there was problems with easel in their G code controller. I don't know how true that is, but I'm just trying something different. That's all. Right off rip. I just like the more options in Carveco. That's all. I'm not sure. I haven't tried them all out. There's a whole list that y'all put out: Inkscape, Carbide 3D, Autodesk. There's so many to choose from. I'm like, well, which one's best? I really don't know. So it's nothing to grow gray hair over. Question on the. Sorry, I wasn't quite prepared for everything. As far as the version of Makerverse, it's loaded as a 1.1.3 versus the 1.5. Maybe I haven't got all my ducks in a row. I can't seem to get the 1.5 to load.
I wouldn't, unless you're trying to laser, I wouldn't worry about it even then.
Okay.
1.3 that has it too. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. I'd stick with 1.3. The others are beta testing right now. So
okay,
we're probably just going to hop them and go straight into 2.0. So
I'm loving it so far.
Good.
The only real issue I have is my big old garage is 300 feet from the house, and you know anything about Wi-Fi extenders and what's good, what's bad? I don't know. I'm gonna have to find one.
I use a mesh network called Eero, and it works well for me.
Okay. Eero. Okay.
EERO is the one I use.
Okay. I'll look that up. Other than that, I mean, I sort of get a signal out there, and it's intermittent and the download.
Yeah, it's tough. Mine's not 300 feet, so you would have to probably set up a relay somewhere in there. So I don't know. I've heard you can bury them in some instances too. So yeah, I had one of the cable guys come out and talk to me about it too, trying to get signal out far like that. And I don't know, any other ideas, guys? I mean, 300 feet is far.
I use the Google Mesh, all the pucks.
Yeah.
I bought a kit of 3. And you can't walk anywhere in my front yard, my backyard, my garage, upstairs with the kids, and you don't have 100% full signal.
Okay.
Everywhere. And I did end up going ahead and buying another puck, and I put it in the garage out here, and those things are like stupid simple. I mean, you plug it in and it sees the other pucks and says, you want to add this to your mesh network? Yep. Done.
okay.
And I mean, it's super user friendly and yeah. So I mean, like I said, we go into our backyard, you got full bars. You go into the garage, full bars. You go into our front yard, clear out in the street, full bars.
Okay.
The whole area is just blanketed.
Okay, I can open all the garage doors and all the doors in my metal building, and it pulls in the signal halfway decent. But if I close the doors, then I don't get signal. So so I'll try that.
Yeah, so the beauty of a mesh network is if, like, let's say you have a puck in the house and you go out in the garage and you're getting like 2 bars. If you buy another puck and you plug it in your garage, then it sees those 2 bars from that other one and it boosts it and redistributes it in that area.
Okay.
So as long as you're getting, I wouldn't say 1 bar, I'd say as long as you're getting 2 bars,
Sure.
somewhere around your garage, you put another puck in there and it'll grab it and it'll reboost that signal and redistribute it. And you can put that puck clear in the back corner closest to the house, where you would get the best strength.
Yeah.
Mine is buried over here behind the freezer and everything in my garage. You don't even know it's in here, but man,
Okay.
it's full signal. It's full
great.
booming signal.
All
They're
right.
really great to have. Yeah.
Well,
So
I'm
I've
not-
actually, go ahead.
Well, I'm not in Georgia where you are, Mr. Warren, but I am in Florida. But
Yeah.
Thanks for the heads up about the humidity and the chains, and I'll keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, just keep it. There's a lot of dry lube and different lube options. Really, I've used a little bit of everything. It's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But as a guy that's moved in many houses, I just because you think you know what you're looking for in a house, and then you get there and realize the builder sucked at something, this or that. I actually may have acquired. I'm not saying I stole it, but I was acquired and given to me length upon length of Cat 5 and Cat 6 cable, and you
Okay.
can buy the actual pieces for like $10 and a cable, a Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable pliers.
Sure.
And I started building my own cable and distributing it, especially if it was long distance. Oh yeah, I've done a lot of fun stuff like that. That I think the only reason why I bring that up, if it's truly that far from your house, it might be a problem. But it's pretty durable cable, and you'd be surprised if you could put it in a few inches underneath the ground with a pipe or something to secure it. I don't think you'd have a problem. It's just something to think about if it's that far away.
Yeah, that actually would not be a problem. I own a trencher, so I trenched electrical and ran all that myself too, my garage. So if I have to, I'll just toss in a Cat 6E.
You could probably just tag it along and drag it through the same line.
Yeah, that's a good idea. But I'm gonna try the Google Mesh before I bring out my big guns.
Yeah, one's little bit less work than the other.
Yeah.
But no, for me, it was just frustrating because I also had a puppy that may have shooted through 2 25-foot lines when I was
Right.
buying them off Amazon, and the frustration led to no, I'm not spending any more money. I'm going to build it myself. And I was surprised at how easy it really was. So yeah, now I just have like a couple 100 feet of cable sitting in the back of my closet that I use when I need it.
Okay. As far as the G codes or the soft codes that'll prevent this, but yet I'm seeing it on the program where it's centered up and it looks like it's going to cut. It's just my imagination, that type thing. I'm not sure if that's just a calibration deal. It doesn't make sense.
So are you talking about soft limits? You get soft limit
Yes.
alarms?
Yes.
Okay, so that's completely up to you. But if you go to the settings on the left-hand side of Makerverse, you click in settings and you scroll down, you'll see where it says soft limits. You can
Okay.
just disable those. They're usually, it says 1. Go ahead and change that to 0 and then click the little save icon next to it.
Okay.
But soft limits, they're calculated soft limits, not like a normal CNC with a limit switch to where it says, boom, this is it. The soft limits in Makerverse are calculated. So sometimes it gets confused as to where the actual limit really is, right? So me personally, I shut them off. Just a disclaimer on that. If you shut them off, never leave your machine.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Right.
Because
Well,
you can easily bottom it out. You can run it off the sled. I mean, you
Sure.
can do all kinds of things like that. But
Sir, how big are you cutting? That's a big, how big is the piece you're cutting?
well, initially I had a 4x3 foot piece, and I was playing around with it because I hadn't had a piece of stock 4x8. So this morning I wanted to get a piece of stock 4x8, recalibrated everything, and with the same program or the same file I downloaded, I still have soft limit alarms, and I'm like, okay, why? An actual 4x8, because I thought, because initially I calibrated with a 4x3 foot, I thought, well, okay, maybe it's not registering that. And I didn't know it was the difference between, maybe it's not seeing the inches versus metric, or the fact that
So
one's
just to make sure we're talking the same thing, 4 feet wide by 3 feet tall.
right.
Okay.
That's initially what I did, and then this morning I changed it to a standard 4x8 sheet plywood, recalibrated it, and zeroed everything, seemed fine. And when I load the file on there, it still give me a soft limit error, and I thought, well, okay, everything's now calibrated to the initial what was asked of it to begin with. So
What happens when you run a small file?
no problem. When I went to the easel file, the NC file, it's just the letter D, it goes to cut it no problem. And it's a 6x6, and this is 12" by 14. I'm like, well, how's that? So I have not looked, like I said, and it's still, I haven't read through everything. There was a $120 to disable the soft limits. It wouldn't accept that. But like I say, just maybe, I'm not sure if it's because one's a Carb and the other's an easel. And I don't know if that was the reasoning. I haven't figured that part out yet.
And so
Yeah, I was trying to carve
your soft limits and stuff aren't set in your design software. They're set in
Okay.
Makerverse.
They are
So
set
in
Makerverse.
Makerverse, when you upload your design in there, like I said, on the left-hand side, click the little down button and it'll expand everything. You can scroll through all of those settings. You'll see one that says soft limits.
Okay.
And it'll say 1, or it may say 0, but usually if they're on, it says 1. Delete, type in 0, and then click the little save disk icon next to it. And that'll shut those off. You
Okay.
can turn them on anytime you want. Just go in
Sure.
and then just type in 1, right? And it turns them back on. But
Okay.
that's how you can disable that, and you can use that to troubleshoot to see if everything's working. The only question I have is when you do your calibration, it actually asks you for your the dimensions of your cutting area.
Correct.
You're putting in 4x8, or you actually measured it and
Yes.
put in exactly what that dimension was, right? Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then that's what I initially, I had a smaller piece, 4x3, and it cut no problem. But the only difference, I thought, well, maybe it's because I don't have a 4x8 sheet, and I didn't mess with my offsets yet. And I thought, well, okay, I didn't mess with the offsets. I'm still going to try to cut out a center. And on the MakerVerse 3D, it shows my tool right there at the cutting point. I'm like, well, I don't see how I'm out of range. So I'm gonna look at that.
One other thing you might consider, I've not tried Carbco, but like Carbide Create has a
Okay.
weird like double tap when you create a file. You have to click it twice to get it to run. So it's like basically you click it once and then it lets you it starts to go, then it pauses. Are you sure you want to go again? The other thing I've encountered, and this is on my end, so the one kind of minor weakness that Makerverse has within the soft limits is its Z-axis. It really only gives you about an inch on that Z-axis of soft limits. So what could be happening is if you have it set wrong, it thinks it's got to go too far up before it starts its cut, because it like your safety clearance.
Right.
I would check that and make sure that it's not the Z-axis. I'm curious which soft limit's going off. That's what I'd be curious as to what's driving it, because the Z-axis is the #1 culprit for me. Is if I do something funky, or if I'm trying to cut, especially when I was cutting foam, I had to completely remove soft limits to run the foam because I was cutting 1.5 inch thick foam.
I see.
I don't know. That's just something else to think about.
I'd definitely be checking it out. Just it's coming out of about 100 miles an hour, which I love. You know, it's exciting. So, you know, it's a learning curve, and I enjoy it. Kind of getting back into the feel of things. It's been a while.
Look, if you enjoy the challenge, you're in the right group.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't enjoy the challenge, you need to go try a different hobby, because CNC is not your hobby.
Well, I did it for a long time in different avenues. I was in the hydraulic field way back when, owned my own business, and worked on had some old CNCs way back when I was a lot younger in the companies I worked for, and it's progressed a long ways. And to tinker around in the garage, which you know, especially with these curvatures and stuff, that I don't know, I've been after this for a while, so I'm excited to play around with it. And it's not frustrating at all. I kind of enjoy it.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing else major, guys. I'm going to bounce. But yeah, I really appreciate you joining in too. This is a good conversation. Lauren, as always, thank you so much for the input. Always helpful. How's the move going right now, or the prep work for it? It's going all right?
Oh, it's just collecting everything. So that's the fun piece, is getting everything together. But we don't actually move for about 2 months. So
okay, gotcha. Still in the prep phase. Got it. Cool. All right. Well, best of luck, as well as everything going on overseas. It's craziness there. So
yeah.
All right. Thanks for the help. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Yep. Bye.
Bye.